Hello, YouTube. The Thracians are ancient people who have lived in the eastern part of the Balkans. Of all the ancient cultures, like the Egyptians, the Minoans, for example, well, the Thracians are some of the most mysterious. They have left a lot of artifacts, but with little information, since they have never presented their own alphabet. But thanks to the testimonies of the writers in antiquity, we know a lot about Thrace and the people of this country. Thracia in Bulgarian, Thracia in Russian. These people inhabited considerably large area, the territory of modern Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, parts of Slovakia, Ukraine, Greece, European and Asian Turkey. The best-known Thracians, for example, are Spartacus, who made Rome tremble with his uprisal of the slaves, and Orpheus, the great musician and thinker, not to forget the deified priest Zalmoxis, whose doctrine became famous among many people. What we know about them comes mainly from the ancient Greek sources and from the multiple remains scattered around the whole territory of Bulgaria, as well as parts of Turkey, Greece, North Macedonia, Romania, and Serbia. Thracians have colonized so many places and participated in so many events in different lands. It is no wonder that these people were called by Herodotus the most numerous nation after the Indians. It is known that the Thracians had lived from at least 2000 before Common Era, probably even earlier. Basically, they had never created a powerful unified empire, but they had been always divided into local tribes and their local states. Several of these tribes had inhabited the Rhodope Mountains, and the main of them has been the tribe of the Odryses. Probably this tribe has left most of the remains in the eastern Rhodopes. We just do not know. There are indicators that there have been even older, more ancient people living in the eastern Rhodope because of the ancient artifacts that are too bizarre and do not fit the conventional image of the Thracians. Some of the artifacts are estimated to be 5,000 to 6,000 years old. Then there was something rather strange. There's apparently an odd gap, somewhere about 3,000 before Common Era, without evidence of human presence in the whole of the eastern part of the Balkans. Now, travelers in that land can observe strange trapezoid niche on the rock walls, various tombs, religious sanctuaries, strange round or oval holes carved on rocks, and even round Stonehenge-like dolmens. Those travelers who ask questions will hear stories and legends obscured in a mix of real history and fantasy. See, the Romans came to the eastern part of the Balkans in the 1st century before Common Era, but the Rhodope Mountains remained the last Balkan territory conquered by the Roman Empire. Spartacus is from this part of the world. Then, about 400 years later, the Slavs came from the north and gradually settled in most of the Balkans, including the eastern Rhodopes. They really like it in this part of the world. The eastern Rhodopes are one of the most beautiful places in Europe. The Rhodope Mountains, again also called the Rhodopes, are one of the largest mountain ranges in the Balkan Peninsula. Not just one of the largest, but also one of the wildest and indeed most mysterious mountain areas in the entire Europe. They are divided into eastern and western Rhodopes. Now, the western part is higher and covered by deep dark forests, really beautiful, really beckoning, but again mysterious areas. But the eastern part is lower, but also full of ancient secrets. The main city in eastern Rhodops is Karjali. Besides it, there are several smaller cities and towns: Krumovgrad, Mopchilgrad, Madjarovo, and Ivailovograd, as well as some towns on the edge of the mountains. But there are also hundreds of small villages in eastern Rhodops scattered around the hills and the valleys. Now, most of the population is a mix of Bulgarians and ethnic Turks. And of course, there are different religions in the area, more Christianity and Islam mostly. What are the eastern Rhodops? Hills, valleys, some covered by forests, some more naked and stony, villages, and several cities. Exploring the mountains up close and going off the grid, travelers can learn there are a lot of mysteries and a long history in the background. For instance, eastern Rhodops are low in elevation but quite rocky. There are odd trapezoid holes on the rock walls called niche. Clearly they are human-made, but who had time to make them? And what was the goal of making those holes? No, I don't think anybody knows today. And this brings us to Tatul. Tatul is something more mysterious and totally different than the known Thracian tombs. The shrine is on the rocky hill with a half pyramid on its top, and there is a sarcophagus at the top of the half pyramid, a unique kind of tomb that can't be seen anywhere else in the world. This place guides us even more to more ancient times before the Thracians, probably several thousand years before Common Era. Numerous artifacts have been discovered in this place, and they reveal a mysterious prehistoric culture. The site was obviously used by the Thracians later. It's located 15 kilometers east of Mopchilgrad, in the area of Asara, near the village of Tatul. This is the second most important megalithic monument in eastern Rhodops, and one of the unique, we can call it Thracian megalithic monuments in Europe. The impressive religious complex was at first described by Nicola Ivanov in 1933 on a dominant scale, which leads to cut in the rock steps and is shaped like a unique domed tomb with two graves which were covered with slabs. It is assumed that the tomb is part of the religious complex, which underlies the idea of funerals out for public worship. There are preserved some service buildings and facilities, as well as part of the fortress wall. It is believed that in ancient times, here were also carried out astronomical observations. So, what are the secrets of the Temple of Orpheus? Historians, according to already established practice, call this ancient structure sanctuary. What it really was and why the ancients needed to make such a serious effort to create this ritual place, a shrine, we are unlikely to ever know. From modern historical official descriptions, you can learn not so much, and even more so we cannot know whether everything they wrote had any relation to reality. The ruins of a huge temple complex carved in the rocks near the village of Tatul in eastern Rhodops are one of the most unique megalithic monuments of the, again, assuming Thracian era in Bulgaria. This sacred object is a rock mass, the top of which, again, has the shape of a truncated pyramid. The complex includes two sarcophagi, the quadrangular bed for the main altar, and a 3-meter well. Some historians believe that this place is associated with the mythical hero Orpheus, but at the moment there is not enough scientific evidence to confirm this hypothesis. Therefore, this place is often called the Temple of Orpheus, or Kayabashi, stone head in Turkish. In the immediate vicinity of the temple, there is a circle of clay altars on which sacrifices were made. In the process of archaeological excavations, hundreds of cult objects were discovered in this place, such as clay idols, spindles, ceramics, and other clay products. Scientists believe that this sanctuary was used not only for religious purposes, but again, also for astronomical observations. So, this place originated as a point of worship 6,000 years ago at the end of the Copper Age in 4 millennium BC. Professor Ovcharov explained in 2007. We presumed this, but had no evidence. Finally, however, we came across a massive layer from the Stone Copper Age, rich in finds, deer and boar sacrifices, and a range of cult items. It seems that the rocks of Tatul's Hill housed a big building. We found large chunks from its adobe walls, so we can assert now that an ancient temple operated in the rocks 6,000 years ago. We cannot say what was the cult it served in that period, but we can learn more about its Bronze Age priorities. We have dug out the total of 35 Bronze Age altars used for making sacrifices to gods. And one of the altars is larger than the rest. It is made of very compact clay and was obviously the main altar of the shrine. It seems that in the 2nd millennium BC, in the Middle and Late Bronze Age, the shrine in Tatul began to be associated with the legendary musician Orpheus. It was then that the process of carving into the rocks started. There were indeed temples in Stone Copper Age, but they were arranged right into natural rocks and caves. The change that came with the Bronze Age was the carving rock spaces. That's when it started. The truncated pyramid with the tomb is already dated to that time. It impresses all visitors of Tatul. We believe that this was Orpheus' symbolical tomb. This trail leads us in time to the appearance of the magnificent shrine that everybody can relish today. The shrine is dated from the 4th to 3rd centuries BC, in the era of the celebrated rock tombs in the Thracian Valley. Its architecture and construction method make it close to the Kazanyak tombs. However, it is also the first above the ground temple in Thrace, Professor Ovcharov explained. Viewed from within, it resembled a castle perched on the rock. Cult practices in Tatul Shrine continued uninterrupted until the adoption of Christianity in the late 4th and early 5th centuries Common Era, when it was converted into private estate and remained so until the end of the 12th century. The Orpheus Shrine is in close proximity to the holy stone city of the Thracians, Perperikon. It is the largest megalith in the Balkans, stretching on an area of 12 square kilometers. The city is made of a strong fortress wall, an acropolis, a palace hewn into the rocks, and 2 suburbs. The first archaeological finds in Perperikon include the 2 animal heads dated from 3rd to 1st century BC, before Common Era. One of them is a dragon with an open mouth, a crest, and adornments. The other find is part of a cobra head, an unique find, according to Professor Ovcharov. We know that the serpent is the guardian of the earth womb, a cult directly linked to the Thracian god Dionysus. The finds belong to a Rhodope mountain culture named Tsepina. Tsepina is a stronghold in the western Rhodopes where ceramic items of this kind were found for the first time. These are cult items. We have dug out vessels with cult scenes depicted on them, concluded archaeologist Professor Nikolai Ovcharov in an interview from 2007. Well, after a 15 years hiatus, excavations again resumed in 2022 at the Thracian sanctuary of Orpheus near the village of Tatul. They were financed by the municipality of Mopchilgrad. The site near Tatul has been functioning since ancient times. Over the years, we have managed to explore the part located around a large rock with a carved sarcophagus, said archaeologist Nikolai Ovcharov, who led the research. He noted that the great Bulgarian archaeologist Professor Ivan Venedikov had a hypothesis that this was the grave of Orpheus, which was later proven during the excavations. Currently, the expedition is exploring a hill 100 meters from the rock tomb of Orpheus. According to one testimony from the early 20th century, there were remains of a medieval church there. Today, archaeologists came across walls that testify to the presence of a large cult complex. In the course of the excavation, they would be able to better estimate its size. Tatul is an exceptional cult center from almost 4,000 years ago, and it's significant for the entire Eastern Mediterranean. I'm sure they'll find much more in that area. Now, again, through the years, around 30 clay altars and other items from the 19th to 18th centuries before Common Era have been excavated, as well as an idol, a nude male figure from the Iron Age, proving the sanctuary was used without interruption in the period. A stone wall was erected surrounding the hill between the 4th and the 1st century before Common Era, and the temple was constructed shortly thereafter, with the religious complex gradually expanding, and the religious activity worshipping the man buried in Tatul shifting to the mausoleum that was built. Several new buildings were constructed in the 2nd to 3rd century Common Era, and the Christianization of the Rhodopes in the late 4th and early 5th century resulted in the conversion of the complex into a local ruler's domain, featuring a defensive tower. The complex also suffered from two earthquakes, one in the 12th century before Common Era and one in the 14th century Common Era, or AD. Every year, tens of thousands of tourists apparently visit this historic site associated with the mythical Orpheus. But I want to go back to the Perperikon. Okay, it's the largest megalithic archaeological site in the Balkans. And it is being excavated by Professor Nikolai Ovcharov. He is known as the Bulgarian Indiana Jones. This Perperikon sits on a high rocky hill, and it's 15 kilometers to the north of the present-day town of Karjali in Bulgaria. If you are in Bulgaria, you shouldn't miss the archaeological sites I'm mentioning. Perperikon is located in the East Rhodope mountain. The rock city stands on a cliff top at a height of 470 meters. The village of Gorna Krepast lies at its foot, and the river Perpereshka flows beside it. The comfortable river valley has created conditions of life for human habitation since ancient times. Therefore, the valley is strewn with dozens of archaeological sites from various ages. And the center there is Perperikon. While the first traces of civilization at Perperikon go back to 5,000 before Common Era, what is of most interest to archaeologists is the most recent 1,500 years before Common Era, and only known example of a huge Thracian city called the European Machu Picchu or Stone Pompeii. complete with buildings, rooms, streets, squares, and a water supply system. It is unlike anything that anyone had ever associated with the so-called barbaric Thracians. Of particular interest is a huge altar, 6 feet in diameter and hewn straight out of the rock. Here the Thracians would have practiced fire rituals such as dancing on hot coals, and would eventually, that would be about 500 AD, erect a small church when they were Christianized by the Romans. In the year 2007, Bulgarian archaeologists have found 2 unique ceramic figurines of cobra and dragon heads. And I already mentioned them. And I'm sure they'll find more because they continue excavations at that rock sanctuary of Perperikon. The 2 figurines were part of the ornaments of a clay altar dating roughly to the period between the 3rd and the 1st centuries before Common Era. Again, this is according to Ovcharov. So here again are the symbols of the dragon and the snake, as in other most ancient cultures of the world. And as I said, we think that this is part of the Tsepina culture, already described. And it's, again, named after the key Thracian fortress in the Rotopi Mountains. It played an important strategic role well into the medieval era, but that's a little bit outside of the age of interest to us. The 2 finds are more important than the Roman era finds because they offer much more insight into the distinctive traits of the local culture. Snakes were considered guardians of the deep, and as such were closely associated with the cult of Dionysus, whose shrine the Bulgarian archaeologists are currently excavating. The next stage of the dig, which is staffed by close to 150 people, is to examine the southern quarter of the city, where the archaeologists hope to find the remains of a 3rd palace, dating back to the Thracian era. And as we know now, the city of Perperikon has been inhabited since about 5000 BC, while the nearby shrine dedicated to Orpheus near the village of Tatul dates back to 6000 BC and is older than the pyramids of Giza. So apparently in 2022, archaeologists discovered another temple at the site of the ancient Thracian city of Perperikon, just 10 meters away from the well-known hall in the palace sanctuary. Some parts of the temple walls have survived to a height of almost 3 meters, making it one of the best preserved buildings found so far on Perperikon. So far, the eastern side of the monumental building has been excavated, uncovered, complete with a precisely shaped altar in the rock. After the adoption of Christianity at the beginning of the 5th century, just like the other pagan temples in the city, this one was buried and turned into a warehouse for storing clay jars for grain, according to Professor Ovcharov. It has already been established that the entire complex of temples dedicated to various deities of the time surrounded the ancient rock altar of Dionysus in the Roman period. And however, the deity to which the latest discovery was dedicated is yet to be determined, according to Associate Professor Zdravko Dimitrov of the National Institute of Archaeology at the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, who asserts that the complex is the only one of its kind in Bulgaria. I wonder if they will find more reptilian symbols, so to say, more ancient dragons on this site. I will keep you updated. If you like my research, please support me through the links you will find in the description to this video. Please tell others about my channel, and please like my videos, and definitely I'll bring you more of the interesting archaeological finds from most mysterious periods of our history in Eurasia and elsewhere. Thank you.